So hi, thank you for introduction. My name is Masashi Hamada from Tokyo University. And it's a great pleasure to be here for this kind of very historical, nice meeting. And my task is to introduce some deep brain stimulation and neuromodulation of neurodegenerative disorders. Well, I think even though this title is clear for us as a neurologist or neuroscientist, but maybe most of you don't really know or what do we mean by brain stimulation, neuromodulation, and also the neurodegenerative disorders. And actually, the neurodegenerative disorders mean that most of them is from some aggregation of the abnormal protein in the brain which causes the neurodegeneration, which might result in some several symptoms. And one of the good example of this kind of neurodegenerative disorders is the Parkinson's disease, as we have some discussion yesterday. And the cardinal symptom, the classical typical symptoms of the Parkinson's disease is that we learn in the medical school, so we can easily remember that those symptoms that it can be stand for TRAP. So that TRAP stand for the tremor, the trembling of the hand or foot, and rigidity is a muscle stiffness, and akinesia. Akinesia is a kind of slowness of the movement, and the postural instability, that's difficulty in walking. And these symptoms is caused by the degeneration of the dopamine neurons in the substantia nigra in the midbrain, indicated here. So this is a section of the healthy subject and Parkinson's disease patient. As you know, these kind of dopamine neurons contains the melatonin, which has some kind of this black lines over here in healthy subject, but in Parkinson's disease, there are a lack of these kind of melatonin-containing neurons, which indicate of dopamine neurons degeneration. The main treatment for these patients is actually using the dopamine replacing therapy. We subscribe the dopamine to this patient, and that may have the very good improvement in motor symptoms. And actually, where is the midbrain or the substantia nigra is in the brain is just a very center, deep structure of the brain, which is called the basal ganglia. And after the long-term treatment, like 10 years for the L-DOPA or the drug treatment, we have several difficulty in treating these patients because we have lots of side effects caused by the dopamine replacement therapy, like motor fluctuation or the wearing of, we say. And in these patients, when we induce the needles in the stimulating electrodes over the subthalamus, which is called deep brain stimulation, which causes significant improvement in the patient's symptoms. And I will show you some good example over here. So this patient have DBS therapy for 6 years, and the left side show the DBS off, and right is DBS on. As you see, this in on condition, this patient can do the tapping or the pointing the finger of the doctors easily, but in the left, in the off state, he can't really do with the tremor and rigidity or the difficulty in initiating the movement. And strikingly, this video is actually of the gait. Actually, this patient can walk in on state, but in off, can't. It's quite clear that DBS significantly improved the patient in the Parkinson's disease. Right. So actually, the conclusion from these slides is that brain stimulation works in some patients in the Parkinson's disease. So actually, the brain stimulation have two different ways. One is direct method, and one is the indirect method. The good example for direct stimulation is deep brain stimulation, as I showed you in the last slide. And another method, this is actually my field, an indirect method, which is called the transcranial magnetic stimulation. I will show you details about the TMS in the next following slides, but there are two important differences between these two methods. Like the one is the surgery. So of course the DBS needs surgery, so that is called invasive technique. However, the TMS is actually indirect method. You can only put the coil over the head and we can stimulate in the intact skull or even in normal subject. And the target, another important difference is the target. Target is different. For the DBS, of course, the target with the deeper structure of the brain, like I showed you in the last slide, that the basal ganglia is the main target. However, the indirect method TMS can only stimulate the surface of the cortex because the penetration of the induced current cannot go in further or the deeper structure. So actually, the TMS is invented in 1985 by the Tony Barker and others from England. And this is a very old prototype of the stimulator. And now recently, we have the computerized, very nice, sophisticated version. Although that the exact mechanisms is the same, or that does not change so much. So that we use the Faraday's law, actually put on the coil over the head and induce the electric current in the coil, which causes the magnetic field around the coil. And this causes because of the Faraday's law and Lenz's law, we have the induced current in the conductive tissue like brain. And using this kind of induced current which can occur in the brain, we can actually stimulate the cortical neuron non-invasively. Right, so this is one example. This is actually me, and I am being stimulated. And actually, in this case, this stimulating my left hand motor area or the primary motor cortex, which have the innervation or the direct connection to the right hand. So look at this, my right hand over here. And here. So you have a quick stimulation, and you can have a twitch over here. And if you put on the right side of the head, you can have the twitch in the left hand, but not in the right hand. So my motor pathway is quite normal. Right. So, and when we use this TMS as a neuromodulation technique, we can have the repetitive stimulation. That is kind of actually this is one example. Like you can hear the stimulus sound repetitively.
I'm at Meaningful Medicine in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I'm working
actually,
with
this is a patient of
Dr.
depression.
Bosworth,
and the TMS, our TMS is actually approved by the FDA for depression treatment right now.
About 4 weeks now, and it is changing my life in ways I could have never expected. I'm not going to be able to talk
something like this,
tapping,
and this can cause some after effects.
I am able to
which have the improvement
in
depressive symptoms. Okay, so it seems that brain stimulation works for the treatment of several neurological psychiatric disorders. So the problem is how does it work? And actually, we think about the brain. Of course, there are a number of neurons in the brain itself. Then the neurons have a cell body and an axon and synaptic terminals. And these are connected to each other. Also, important point is that all parts of the brain are not equipotent. Like in the frontal cortex, we have some execution of any kind of behavior. And the parietal lobe or the visual cortex have have the function of the sensory function, like visual or the touch and pressure over here, and taste is right over there. And of course, temporal lobe have hearing. Also, the memory itself can be operated in the temporal lobe. And another important point is many brain's parts connect each other. So there are kind of like the connectivity map or the Google flying map of it, like here, that they are connected significantly to each other. And more simplified version is like this. And when we see, as a neurology, where we are now thinking about what's happened in the brain disease condition. So the region in the several, according to the several number of the evidence that regions in the disease state, the region could be abnormally excited or abnormally inhibited, or it may be simply disconnected. So these are the conditions that we have in the disease condition. So when we use the brain stimulation as a treatment, maybe strategy would be inhibit the abnormal excitation or activate abnormally inhibited neurons, or stimulate surviving normal fibers to regain the normal function. So the question would be, can we really modulate brain activity bidirectionally? So that's quite important for the to treat the patient. And actually answer is yes, we can. We have the several different kind of methods for the non-invasive stimulation, like repetitive TMS. And we have several different type of protocols, and we change the parameters like low frequency or high frequency, or same as in other different type of protocol. We can have the decrease of the stimulated area in several protocols, and with the some kind of different like high frequency RTMS protocol, we can have increase of the stimulated cortex. And these kind of decrease or increase or the bidirectional modulation of excitability seems to be caused by the similar to the synaptic plasticity mechanism. So that TMS can actually alter the functioning of the brain beyond the time of stimulation, offering potential for therapy. So it means that this kind of RTMS effect can last after the period of the stimulation. So not only the stimulated, the timing, not only the during the stimulation, but after like 1 day, 2 days or something, they are lasting effects. So when we use these kind of changes occurs in the stimulated area, we can maybe apply to the some neurological disease condition. Although that, as I said, that the synaptic plasticity may be the candidate mechanisms, well, it has not yet been demonstrated that the site of such changes is really synapses. So we say the LTP-like or LTB-like plasticity as an effect of the any kind of non-invasive stimulation. But this is a kind of example of the with these changes occurs in the synapses. So this is a slice experiment. Apply the TMS over the slice over here, and this is a kind of a synaptic activity. So the firing rate. So there are sharp firing over this time 3 times over here. Then after the stimulation, you can see that increase of firing, so the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and also the amplitude itself becoming larger. Also, there are increase in the spine sizes, which is quite substantially correlated with synaptic plasticity itself. And there are, look at these small arrows, or this one spine here, and you can see the enlargement after 3 hours of the stimulation and go back to the baseline level after 6 hours. So repetitive TMS actually induce functional and structural plasticity. And these kind of LTMS also can use for the treatment of stroke. Like this is 41-year-old stroke survivor, and she has some problem in the right-hand movement because of the right hemiparesis. As you see in this video, you can see the fist movement is quite slow, but after the 1 session of a repetitive TMS, you can have a more faster movement after the stimulation, and even the same as in opening the fingers. So this is quite good evidence that the LTMS can be used even in a stroke patient. So this is a summary. So given that the recovery from any brain disease depends on learning new patterns of activity, presumably via synaptic plasticity, to maximize the use of a remaining brain, plasticity induced by brain stimulation and neuromodulation is an effective therapeutic option to improve recovery in not only the neurodegenerative disorders, but neurological and psychiatric disorders. So in the following speakers, Dan will show you the DBS and the Parkinson's disease patient as one example of the inhibit abnormally exciting region using the brain stimulation. And Yukio will show you about what's happened, the disconnected connected diseases and how to use the brain stimulation to get better function in these patients. Thank you very much.